Kit Carson, Part 12. Meanwhile, a party was sent from here to surprise Sonoma, a Mexican military post. They captured it, taking one general and two captains prisoner, besides several cannon and a number of small arms. Soon after the fort was taken, Fremont had learned positively that war had been declared. He now marched to Sonoma and found it in the possession of the men he had sent in advance. During our stay here, General Castro ordered one of his captains and a large force of men from San Francisco to attack us and drive us from the country. While this captain was on the march toward us, he caught two of our men who were carrying news to the settlers that Sonoma was taken and war declared, whom he brutally murdered. He found that we were anxious to meet him and commenced his retreat. We followed him for 6 days and nights, but could not overtake him. He made his escape by leaving his animals behind. He reached San Francisco and from there went to the pueblo of Los Angeles, where General Castro joined him, their object being to reorganize their forces. Fremont left a strong force at Sonoma, as all the American settlers had joined him by this time. He then departed for Sutter's Fort, which he placed under military command. He left as prisoners General Vallejo, the two captains, and an American named Lees, who was the brother-in-law to the general, in charge of the gentleman whom he made commander. He then departed for Monterey, but before our arrival, it had been taken by the Navy under Commodore Sloat. A few days after our arrival, Sloat left, and Commodore Stockton assumed the command. We learned here that General Castro had made his escape and had gone to Los Angeles to reorganize his troops. We found that we could not catch the Mexicans by following them on land, so Fremont proposed that if furnished a frigate to take his men to San Diego, he would there procure animals and drive the Mexican troops from Los Angeles. The frigate Kane, commanded by Captain DuPont, a noble-souled fellow, was furnished him, and in 4 days we arrived at our destination, and our forces were landed, 150 strong. A sufficient number of horses could not be procured at San Diego, and men were sent out to scour the country and to press into service any animals they could find. Finally, we were all mounted and started for Los Angeles. The Mexicans heard of our approach and fled, although they were 700 strong. General Castro, the governor, and the other officers departed for Sonoma, and the rest of them to any part of the country where they thought they would not meet with Americans. We arrived within a league of the town and awaited the coming of Commodore Stockton, as we had arranged to do before our departure from Monterey. We were finally joined by the sailors and Marines, as brave a body of men as I have ever seen. As for the Commodore, it is useless for me to say anything, as he is known to be the bravest of the brave. We took possession of the town and remained there some time until, on September 5, 1846, I was ordered to Washington as a bearer of dispatches, having with me an escort of 15 men. I was ordered to go to Washington in 60 days, which I would have done if I had not been ordered by General Kearny to join him. When I arrived within 10 miles of the copper mines, I discovered an Apache village. It was about 10 o'clock in the morning. They were at war with us, and I knew that if we stayed where we were, we would be seen, and if we endeavored to pass them, they would also see us. So I had a consultation with Maxwell, and we came to the conclusion to take to the timber and approach them cautiously. If we were to be seen, we wished to be as close to them as possible at the moment of the discovery. We kept on our way and were about 100 yards from the village when they saw us. They were somewhat frightened at first, but when we said we were friends en route to New Mexico and wished to trade animals, they were reassured. We chose a good place for our camp, where they paid us a visit. We then commenced trading, and each of us procured a remount, which we needed badly, as nearly all of our animals had given out. We then proceeded on our way, and in 4 days arrived at the first of the settlements. Upon our departure from California, we had only 25 pounds of dried meat. At the river village, we got some corn, which we parched by the fire, and did not have any other food during our trip. We suffered considerably from hunger. On the 6th of October, 1846, I met General Kearny on his march to California, and he ordered me to join him as a guide. I did so, and Fitzpatrick continued on to Washington with the dispatches. On October 18th, we left the Rio del Norte, and on the 3rd of December, we arrived at Warner's Ranch and marched on towards San Diego. On the 6th, we heard of a party of Californians encamped on our route, probably 100 in number. When we had arrived within 10 or 15 miles of their camp, General Kearny sent Lieutenant Hammond ahead with 3 or 4 dragoons to examine their position. The party was accidentally discovered, but not before they saw the encampment, which was in an Indian village. They returned to us with the information they had gained, and General Kearny determined to attack the Californians immediately. About 1 o'clock in the morning, we packed up and moved on. When we were within a mile of their camp, we discovered some spies who had been sent out to watch the road and our movements. We were ordered to trot and then to gallop in pursuit of them, but they retreated to their camp in safety. I was now ordered to join Captain Johnston, who had 15 men under his command. We were ordered to proceed in advance of our troops, our chief object being to get the animals belonging to the Californians. Captain Moore, with part of 2 companies of dragoons and a party of 25 volunteers who had come from San Diego, was ordered to attack the main body of the enemy. They resisted only about 10 or 15 minutes and then retreated. When we were within 100 yards of their camp, my horse fell and threw me, and my rifle was broken into 2 pieces. I barely escaped being trodden to death since I was in advance, and the whole command had to pass over me. I finally saved myself by crawling out of the way. I then ran on about 100 yards to where the fight had commenced. I saw a dead dragoon, and taking his gun and cartridge box, I joined in the melee. Captain Johnston and 2 or 3 of the dragoons had been killed. The Californians then retreated, pursued by Captain Moore for about 3/4 of a mile. About 40 of Moore's men were mounted on horses and the balance on mules. 2 or 3 days before this affair, we had heard of a party of Californians that were en route to Sonora, and Lieutenant Davidson and I had been sent with 25 dragoons to surprise them. We had succeeded and had captured 70 or 80 horses, from which Moore selected 40 that were gentle as mounts for his men. In the pursuit, the command had become very much scattered. The enemy, perceiving their opportunity, wheeled and cut off the 40 that were in advance, killing or wounding 36 of them. Among the slain were Captain Moore and Lieutenant Hammond. General Kearny was severely wounded, and nearly every other officer of his command was wounded. Lieutenant Davidson, who was in charge of the 2 howitzers, now came up, but before he could do anything, all of his men were killed or wounded. Then the enemy also captured one of his guns by lassoing the horse which drew it, fastening the lasso to the saddle and then running off with it. They hauled it about 300 yards and then endeavored to fire it at us, but without success. Lieutenant Davidson was now helpless. All of his men and one of his cannon were lost, and he himself was lanced through the clothing several times. One lance thrust passed through the cantle of his saddle, and if the Californian had not missed his aim, he also would have been numbered among the slain. We finally rallied at a rocky point near the place where the advance guard had been defeated, and remained there all night, not daring to move on, and having our dead to bury. We buried them about 12 or 1 o'clock at night, and the next day we resumed our march. End of part 12.